AI companion. Mention stop AI companion. I don't need an AI companion. There you are. There you are.
Can you hear me, bud? Ah, there
I
you
can
go.
hear you.
It's like I'm looking into a mirror right now.
You're in the open space area too, as well.
So my wife's office. We've got, we've got this apartment. They kind of rented it just as like a three-bedroom apartment. It's really like two and a half. Like this is just the third bedroom that we can't fit anyone into. So, but it's big enough for an office.
So it's basically what, 9 o'clock out there?
Yeah, 9 p.m. I've got my little got my little cup of English tea. My set me down. How are you doing, man? You look good.
I'm good. You look good too. It looks like we both got the hibernation beard.
Is that distinguished salt and pepper look that
This is
they
this is
call
this
me?
is kind of like this is like my third or fourth go around with this thing. It's like the old Saturday Night Live skit, the Chris Farley, the hibernal. He chugs
It's like a
that big,
bucket.
and he wakes up. He's like, I feel great. I missed the Super Bowl, didn't I? I have no idea how to work technology now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I still got you.
Huh. It just went you just went quieter. Now I can hear you fine. I don't know. I'm not too concerned about it.
All right.
Really.
This is your world, man. I'm just living in it. If you're not concerned, then I'm going to use that as my benchmark.
Congratulations. You made it to the pilot episode. So,
all these years really jockeying for position on this one.
yeah, really.
Really paid off. Let me tell
Yeah.
you, like
I
the
did like the
Academy.
trial with my dad the other day, and
Yeah.
I still messed that one up.
Well, he
Even
got
with a trained professional like on the other end, I still
yeah.
messed that one up. So basically, like the whole premise behind this thing, like there's really no structure. I hopefully, like as I keep doing these more, they'll kind of come together as, like something. And then the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna branch it out to like other kids from the neighborhood.
That's like the one thing my parents kind of liked about the street. Like all the kids just kind of communally got together and played football in the streets.
Yeah,
And
street
so
ball.
all of us would just run down and we'd all kind of get in the game and everything like that.
For the most part, it's just like I just want to catch up with people. This is my Rod Stewart phase where I'm just kind of like reinventing myself by reinventing myself by reinventing myself. He went into like Motown, the Great American Songbook, and he was like a crooner then. I don't have a working title as of yet. Basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a playlist. So, let's say just between the years of '87 and '93, setting the scene, I guess, like it's summer break and there's only one spot that we could go in our neighborhood, the community pool, the beach
Mm.
club. And every summer we'd go down the beach club. We'd spend like the whole summer down at the beach club.
I remember getting shoved out the door after breakfast. Like my mom would
Yeah.
just like literally kick us. She'd kick our ass out of the house. She'd be like, "All right, now get the fuck out of here." And so
How about we get into our little playlist here thing. So
I'll riff with you. Don't worry about it. We'll we'll
okay.
we'll play it back and forth.
Give me a second. I need to get in character.
Your vocalizations.
Unique New York.
How now, brown cow.
Ah! 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 The late 80s to early 90s. We had a community pool. It was open from like 9, and then they closed down at like lunchtime. And
Yeah,
then,
that sounds about right.
or no, was it
Yeah,
even longer than that? It opened at 9, stayed open until 5. Then everybody had to get the fuck out and go home for dinner. And then if you wanted to come back at 6, they were open from like 6 to 9.
I'm inclined to say yes, but I'm hesitant only because I was under the impression that they did stop for lunch. Again, it could have been like, yeah, they stopped for half an hour and like the lifeguard just took a lunch break. You know what I mean? Like they had
Yeah.
rest periods regardless, right? I used to go in the lake a lot. So that's the thing. It's like I didn't like the rest periods. So I
Yeah,
opted for the
no,
lake
that's what we both
more
did. I
often than
remember
not.
we would
Yeah.
always, like, as soon as the whistle blew, run down that pathway and jump in the lake.
You'd be dodging like broken glass and sharp rocks and stuff. Like your your feet are tempered in steel by the end of the summer.
Somebody actually step on like a
Oh, I'm
hypodermic
sure.
needle.
I found a needle there once.
Maybe it was different for you. It was different experience for you than it was for me. But I remember going down to the pool. So the radio was
Yeah,
right next to the lifeguard station.
yeah.
Maybe I paid more attention to what the music was going on by who the lifeguard was that day. The radio was pretty much on like all day. Back then, you listened to a radio DJ. It's not like you can do it now. I can make a Spotify. Well, we made a Spotify playlist, and we basically can just add and throw shit anywhere and do whatever we want. But back then you were forced to listen to the radio, absorbing. Like I was absorbing
Yeah.
music back then. There was a lot of good music, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a playlist of like what we think was kind of like our top.
Let me go through my list really quick.
Do you happen to know, like, if, because I'm going to publish this on like Spotify creators, because you're going through Spotify creators for like podcasts, does that give you
Mhm.
privileges to like the licensed music that Spotify like plays?
I would be inclined to say yes, but one, I'm not a lawyer. Two, I've never put together a podcast. With Phil Collins in the air tonight because that was always on 104.9.
Yeah.
There at one point in my life, I remember hearing like three Phil Collins songs back to back in the course of like an hour, and it was upsetting.
100%. Phil Collins was basically kind of like uh he was like the voice of pretty much the summer, but I wasn't gonna go there. I mean, you had like Sue Studio, and then what's the one about the Billy Don't Lose My Number, which was on the radio pretty much just as much as air in the air tonight.
Like no word of a lie, I think he had maybe like three or four like on the top 10 list. Like one
Exactly.
year, he was just crushing it.
Exactly. And it wasn't it, like it was like solo, and then it was also like attached to like Genesis too.
Yeah, he would do that periodically. Where like he's like, you don't like my solo effect, but what if I sprinkle a little Peter Gabriel on you? And all of a sudden, like he was in Genesis, and I was like, oh sweet, it was the same songs. Like he wasn't singing different stuff.
Goddamn. I feel like you and me are like on the same page. It's like Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins. But like Peter Gabriel was probably how I got introduced to MTV. Sledgehammer was basically like a cartoon. So what fucking 8-year-old, 7-year-old kid wouldn't watch like that on MTV? And to tie in with the Beach Club, just to tangent off the Sledgehammer, do you remember the swim shows?
Yeah, and so actually that was going to be my next point. So my next pick is actually Billy Joel. We didn't start the fire, and I thought double whammy because one, you used to hear that on the radio quite a bit, right? And my dad used to love playing it, so we'd hear it constantly all the time. Like Billy Joel was one of his kind of core guys, right? But in addition to that, I remember doing that for the swim show. I think your mom was actually choreographing a lot of that stuff for
For
us.
the potential listeners who might be, jumping in on this pilot episode, what Mike is actually talking about is we we were pretty much like all summer we would hang out at the pool, but there was like a gang of moms. It was called the Beach Club Swim Show. Whoever's mom was in charge of this function for that year would come up with like a whole bunch of musical pageantry songs that the kids had to kind of like lip sync to, and also
Synchronized swimming.
synchronized swimming. So it was basically
Yeah.
like a pageantry of synchronized swimming and lip syncing all to like popular hits of.
The year that I remember doing it, it was like Billy Joel. We didn't start the fire was like one of the songs where we did like the dance around the pool. Everyone dives in, hands
Yeah.
in the air, all that for the spirit. Yeah, that's why Billy Joel made the list. Just because I remember that being kind of like a double whammy. Yeah, it's kind of covering off, not even necessarily just on like my old man loved the songs and
Your
he
old man
like
was
my
a little abrasive too.
he
So
was
did he love it
aggressive.
when you did that song in the
He
swim show?
no like you know what? He just, I don't know. I didn't like look for his reaction. It gave me
It's
the
not like,
nod.
and
Let's
it's not like you could
jump into
see
the
it
pool.
anyways because there was like lights on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You get the spotlight on you and everything like that. But no, I don't know. He didn't really say anything about it. I just remember like knowing the song. Like I was I could sing the words. Like to this day, I still know the verse, right? Yeah, like doing it at the swim shows, it's sort of like, and now we got to do it in rehearsals and on the night, and there's more than one rehearsal. Then I mean, he's a classic, right? He made the pop culture references, and all that sort of good stuff. So I feel like
Nice.
he's got a special place in our old hearts. It was one of those things where like it was like you kind of hate the song, but you love it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I would imagine how a lot of people feel about Nickelback, probably like that.
Oh,
Like people just love to hate them, but because they were so popular.
I've never really gotten into Nickelback. Like I've never bought an album
Yeah.
or I never, like I've never searched it on my Spotify or anything like that.
The problem is that they were too. They were just everywhere for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
People have actually studied this.
Really?
The problem with Nickelback was that they got that they're basically their publishers did too good of a job of promoting their music to the point where people constantly heard it on the radio and got so sick of it that they just totally turned on the band.
Maybe it was like the style of the music that they were kind of like they were jumbled into. I don't think I really participated. You and me were probably more like into the punk shit when we were
Yeah,
when it was like Nickelback's time.
like grungy kind of garage bar rock kind of thing.
I
Kind
wouldn't
of
go as
like
far as saying grunge. I think of Nickelback, and then I would think 3 Days Grace, Three Doors Down. I
yeah,
think of like all
yeah,
those names with like three in it or whatever.
yeah. It's
Everything has
I
its
mean I
place.
same boat. Like I know their hits. I've never gone out of my way to like buy an album or anything like
Right.
that.
As of right now, we got Phil Collins in the air tonight, and then Billy
Yeah.
Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire. So I'm gonna
Yep.
go with this one was probably 87 or maybe it was 88. Do you remember Lisa Lisa and the Cult Jam?
Not particularly. No.
Do you remember that song? It was called like Head to Toe.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh, okay. I'm getting there now.
It was very, very poppy, like along the lines of like New Edition kind of ish.
Yeah.
I think her song, like that song, the Head to Toe song, was a little bit more produced than the Cyndi Lauper because it was
Maybe.
probably like a couple of years later.
Okay.
But there was like a certain kind of there's a certain kind of drum beat. It doesn't sound exactly. I mean, it's obviously like a synth or something, but it or an
Yeah.
electronic drum or something. Nothing really sounds like authentically like an instrument. It sounds like an
Yeah.
electronic instrument.
I think that's the sound they were going for actually. Like it was supposed to be like all synthy and futuristic and stuff like that. Like it had
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
like
yeah,
like the
yeah.
sounds of lasers in the background is not an uncommon thing.
That's probably going to be like my number three. And then number two, Howard Jones. Things can only get better. This is going to sound like the old man in me coming out. That you don't hear sounds like that like you used to back in the early '90s, late '80s, like you do nowadays. Like everything is,
Like in today's music.
yeah, exactly. Like everything is just very,
Yeah.
very glossed out and
They're almost too perfect kind of thing.
exactly, exactly. Those are my two because that's probably like the time zone of like from 87 to I want to say like 89.
Lou Reed, Walk on the Wild Side is what I
Really?
had.
Wow.
Yeah. That was another one where the old man played that in the convertible a lot, like in the summertime. That and for whatever reason, I guess it would be like a fourth pick or something like that. Don Henley, Boys of Summer.
Oh yeah.
That I mean, it was like it's talking about guys in summertime. Like it couldn't you put that right next to a Bud Light commercial back then, and like they match up consistently. Like they're just you might have that's the soundtrack for every beer commercial ever made between that time span.
Your
I think
dad
that was
an
like
Eagles fan?
I wouldn't say he was an Eagles fan. He just liked Don Henley's solo stuff. I never remember him being like, oh yeah, this is Hotel California or whatever. Like he never gushed over that particular. Like he knew
Right.
who the Eagles were because our parents grew up during the '60s. So
Yeah.
I I was introduced almost backwards. Like I was introduced to Don Henley before I even knew any of like the Eagles songs.
Yeah.
Like I didn't
That's
even know I didn't know Don Henley was even in the Eagles until somebody had mentioned like, oh yeah, he's the lead singer of the Eagles. I go, really?
like Simon and Garfunkel. First heard of Paul Simon before I heard of Simon and Garfunkel. I didn't know that that was like before that.
Yeah. Paul Simon was another one who went through some awkward phases. He had his God, what did he do? He had like his African beat phase. There was
So Billy Joel, I think. Well, no, he
Billy
didn't really.
Billy Joel. He did the River of
River of
Dreams.
Dreams.
He had a little tongue and beat drum on the back of it. Somebody was hitting with their knuckles or something like that. Like there was
Yeah,
definitely a
yeah.
jungle flair to it, if you will.
The first Billy Joel album that I bought was uh, Stormfront. It
Yeah,
had We Didn't Start the Fire on it. After that, I think he did come out with like River of Dreams, and when I compared the two, I was like,
yeah,
nah. I'm all about Billy Joel from the beginning
yeah.
of his career up to like Stormfront, and then after that, I'm just like, so you're
Okay.
saying Don Henley's Boys of Summer?
So yeah, it's either that or Lou Reed Walk on the Wild
Oh
Side.
yeah,
I mean,
that's right. Well, why'd you pick Lou
so
Reed? Because of your dad?
yeah, that was just one of the other ones. It was like it was always an old standby. He always had like he had cassettes in those days, right? In the center console and whatnot. He always
Yeah,
had like Lou Reed. He always had Billy Joel, Don Henley, Bruce Springsteen.
yeah,
In addition to like all of the stuff that like we kind of knew at that same time frame that was a little bit maybe a little bit more popular, but more towards like when you're older, not when you're like little small kids at the beach club, but like
right.
starting to get like the teenage years and the
Yeah,
Nirvanas of the world are starting to pop up, Pearl Jam, Hootie the Blowfish, all that sort of other stuff.
yeah,
So the early stuff for me is more rooted in what you would consider, I mean, maybe somewhat not oldies necessarily, but like more recent, like early 80s kind of stuff that it was even still kind of lingering on at
stuff.
that point.
This is stuff that our parents listened to, pretty much.
Yeah,
That was like the only access, pretty much,
yeah.
to music, unless you were getting an allowance on a regular basis and were allowed to go to the record store and buy a cassette tape
Mm-hmm.
or a CD or whatever. Well, I'm gonna jump in and say Another Bad Creation. Remember the song Playground?
Little
It's
little
like
little
a
kids group, right?
it's
Like
like a gang. It's like a gang of like between the ages of like 5 and 11, like a
little black
gang
kids
of
singing,
young.
right? Was this part of like the entire Boys to Men thing? Like all of these like groups coming out of Philadelphia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, it was part of
Uh,
like New Jack Swing, kind of
yeah.
like 9 years old, and you see kids like your age on MTV.
Like they're doing it, dude. They're really doing it.
The reason why I think of that is because like that was on the radio, I think like I don't know how many times that summer. Only one kid in the neighborhood who had that whole album on cassette, and that's the only reason I would go over their house.
That was the biggest thing too when the double tape players came out, and you can like now start you can start like ripping
Oh
songs
yeah,
like
yeah.
recording them for people instead of like trying to like time it up to whatever the hell it played on the radio.
I was just talking to my dad about that because he was saying like when he was a kid, he had one of those like reel to reels, and he would do the same thing.
You'd catch like the first like whatever 10 seconds of like the DJ introducing it.
I would be glued to the radio like every friggin' night. Coming up, we're gonna play Another Bad Creations Playground,
Mm-hmm.
so don't miss it. And then it'd be like 40 minutes later.
I listen for the rest of the afternoon, and we're never gonna play the song.
What you got next?
So this was one I don't know why it was so popular. This was more reminiscent of like when you saw like other families down there like grilling, like if they were had
Okay.
like a picnic down there and everything like that. Midnight Oil, beds on beds are burning, and it was like one of the first music videos that I'd ever seen. It might have been the summer that we moved to Euclid. I just remember that kind of being like the quintessential. Like again, you just heard the song 20
That's
times a day. Like if for whatever reason they were just hammering you with this damn thing, right?
what's so weird is like when I think of Midnight Oil, because that song, I like, did that come out in the 80s or was that like late 90s?
It was 80s. Hold on, let me look it up really quickly. Let me just
Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan.
87.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that was like the year. That was like basically either the summer before or after we moved to Euclid.
That's so funny because like when I think of Midnight Oil, I think I only heard about them like in the later like 90s, like when I got to high school, like 95 or 96 or something.
I don't even know any of their other music though. I said like they played it a ton on the radio. Like, it was just nonstop. So it was another like kind of one hit wonder ish. I think they're like an Australian band. They're one big hit, and now they're probably living off the royalties of that, you know. And they all like all the members of the band probably like now produce music and they're just living off of that one.
Now,
Am I
like
talking?
we're moving up in the years.
I got four, and I actually have one more kind of like on a similar kind of path. Wouldn't necessarily hear this song on the radio. They did have a hit song, the 10th album, Pearl Jam, right?
Yeah.
Um, Release was one of like their, I think, kind of like their underrated hit on that entire album or something like that. It's a really slow jam. If you don't really know it, don't feel bad because it's like it was right like it was competing with like Jeremy, which was getting nonstop attention. One
Yeah.
in the media because of like the school shooting aspect of it, right? Then in addition to that, they were also just an up and coming band too, so it's kind of getting hit all over the place. And it's just one of those songs that sort of slipped under the radar. I kind of think as far as how underappreciated it was, but it's still kind of like it's a really cool slow song. The best song of that album, although it gets no play ever.
It's probably like one of those songs that they only play like live or whatever.
Right.
And it's better received in like a live concert setting or something like that, maybe.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
would
that
imagine so. It's a really it's like I mean, if you were to hear it live, it's baby making music, man. Like they send people home like immediately, you know. Like it's kind of like one of those like kind of romantic things. So if they close the show with it, yeah, that's probably a pretty good one actually.
that whole album I think was so that was kind of like the beginning of me for
Yeah,
grunge.
yeah,
Aside from like Nirvana, I think Nirvana was the start of it. No, I think maybe Pearl Jam came before Nirvana that I discovered Nirvana. I'm saying like
yeah,
I think I discovered Pearl Jam before I discovered Nirvana because it was probably during that summer. And then
yeah,
when I went to school in the fall, I think somebody probably, was like, "Oh, you heard Pearl Jam? Have you heard Nirvana?" Like I probably dived deeper into Nirvana than I did in Pearl Jam. But yeah,
yeah.
you're right. It was like at the time they were playing Even Flow like on the radio, on MTV like all the time. They're
And it was all around that time too, where it's like it's not even that. It was like say like Rollins Band, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Basically, like the entire soundtrack of Wayne's World was kind of making its mark, you know. Movies like Wayne's World for sure, but like other stuff like The Crow had a bunch of like Stone Temple Pilots, like from a cinematic standpoint. Like those are like the
that's
kind of like the eras and
you'll see like old trailers for movies from back then, and I think the Crow
yeah.
popped up now.
They just redid it. So are you sure it was like the old one or was it the new one? Because they remade it basically. It was
The old trailer for the original one because
right.
I think it might have been like the 25th anniversary of his death or something.
Yeah, yeah, Brandon Lee.
Yeah.
The music in that movie hits hard though. It's actually really good stuff, and
Yeah,
it's all
no,
kind of like that.
the soundtrack was awesome. I love that soundtrack.
Yeah, there's at least three songs from that soundtrack that I've got on my playlist currently that I listen to at the gym.
Yeah. Heard Helmet before because that song Milk Toast was like, oh my God. That
So that's on my list actually.
once I heard that intro, I was like, damn, that's fucking tits.
So I remember being introduced to Helmet from you, the Betty soundtrack, and that's actually it's funny. The Milk Toast song is on my list,
Yeah.
but that was kind of like one of those like I don't remember it at the beach club unless like I had it in like a mixtape or something like that. And I had my headphones in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
Walkman or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Like that's the only context that I would have for like the beach club, but around that same Central Time era of music genre, I guess. So I was
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
flooding at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, really stuff. Well, Aerosmith was I was kind of getting reintroduced to that.
Get a grip. Was it Get a Grip?
Get a grip with.
It had the kid, Terminator 2. Had the kid from Terminator 2 in the video. Living on the Edge. The
Wait,
John Connor.
he was
He
in
was
the
in the video.
video.
He was like
Doing what?
high school kids or something. They steal a car and then they drive it through like a brick wall.
Never did that. We
No,
missed that one
no, who
apparently.
would? Nobody in high school is that bored.
There was what was it, the Aerosmith, there was one video like, crazy. There's something about like her like in like a it was like that old school the premise of the music video, the storyline, if you will, was like some guy is putting on virtual reality and he's making up this character of himself and he goes for this motorcycle ride with Alicia Silverstone in the back of the motorcycle, yada yada yada. And then it actually ends with
Are
like
you
a
sure
sort of
you're
like
not thinking of Lawnmower Man?
a bit of like an inception feel because like at the end of the video the guy takes the VR helmet off and does like he's kind of like walking around like his basement setup that he's got, and then actually that system ends and it turns out like it's Alicia Silverstone who takes the VR helmet off, and she was the one kind of imagining the guy imagining her kind of thing. But the only reason I remember was because she was in it.
Those were great videos.
Yeah, they
MTV
were.
back in its day, I mean, they had some good stuff. Somewhere along the way, they must have stopped showing like music videos and just did like these reality shows and just
Yeah,
music was an attachment to it.
yeah, that was the thing. I think like VH1 and they were eating their lunch for them. Like they couldn't compete with it because I think what they were trying to turn MTV into was something so different from what it started as that people were just upset about it. And
Yeah.
so as that was happening, like they didn't course correct fast enough to turn it all around. And so like all of their competitors basically ate up their market share and people just didn't go back. They kind of go back to like the reality shows, but they could never go like they couldn't turn it around to go back to just music videos. I think the share was too small at that point. I think if I
Oh,
remember the everything correctly. At one point, they were the only player in town. They kind of
yeah,
revolutionized it in that sense. They tried. I mean, you can't blame them. They just tried to adapt, which they tried to go in a route that they felt like everything was kind of heading, and they weren't necessarily wrong. TV certainly has a good foothold in a lot of stuff now, but like I think they just got so far away from their roots that people just were so upset, and like the stuff they were producing I think people really quickly figured out, with like the reality TV boom and everything. Think about it. It's like you rent a place and you set up a bunch of cameras. That's a lot better than like having a set, having a bunch of designers to create it, having,
yeah,
working lights and all that sort of other stuff.
yeah,
So they're just kind of doing it outside in low key, low budget, low frills kind of thing.
yeah.